On August 15, 1947, the British withdrew after 2 centuries of rule, leaving behind a massive nation with a stagnant economy. The task of nation-building was now in Indian hands, and the leaders faced the immediate challenge of creating a system that could pull millions of people out of deep poverty. To move forward, the new government had to answer 3 basic questions. What goods should the country produce? How should they be produced? And how should they be distributed among the citizens? One option was capitalism, where the market decides. In this system, goods are distributed based on purchasing power, the ability to pay. But in 1947, most Indians had no such power, meaning a pure market system would have left the vast majority behind without a chance to improve their lives. The other extreme was the Soviet socialist model, where the state owns all farms and factories. While this ensures distribution based on need, it also eliminates private property. For a newly independent democracy like India, a system that stripped citizens of their land and property was seen as a bridge too far. India was trapped between 2 global ideologies, neither the total freedom of the market nor the total control of the state seemed capable of solving the specific crises of an impoverished democratic nation. Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru believed India should be the master of its own destiny. He sought a middle path that avoided the drawbacks of the 2 global extremes. The result was the mixed economy. Under this design, the government would manage a strong public sector and plan for the nation's growth, while the private sector would be encouraged to handle everything else the market could produce well. This wasn't just an administrative compromise, it was a way to safeguard India's newly won sovereignty. The leaders feared that if the country became too dependent on any foreign power for its technology or its food, its political independence would be vulnerable to outside interference. In 1950, the Planning Commission was established to turn this middle path into a concrete reality. The era of the 5-year plan had begun. While Nehru provided the vision, the technical blueprint was largely the work of Prasanta Chandra Mahalanobis. He was an elite, Cambridge-educated statistician who believed that national progress could be calculated. Mahalanobis founded the Indian Statistical Institute and used it as a laboratory for development. He invited economists from all over the world, even those who disagreed with his socialist leanings, to treat India's poverty as a mathematical problem to be solved through data. His methodology defined the second 5-year plan. It successfully translated abstract political goals into a rigid, actionable blueprint for industrial and agricultural transformation. The first pillar of the plan was growth. Planners described the gross domestic product, or GDP, as a cake. If the cake is larger, more people can enjoy it. By increasing the country's total output, the nation could provide its citizens with a more varied and richer life. The second pillar was modernization. This meant adopting new technologies, like better seeds on farms or more efficient machines in factories. But the planners also argued that true modernization required a change in social outlook, recognizing that a society is more prosperous when it utilizes the talents of its women in the workplace rather than keeping them confined. The third pillar was self-reliance. After centuries of foreign domination, India aimed to avoid importing goods it could produce itself. The goal was to build a nation that did not have to rely on foreign capital or technology to survive. The final pillar was equity. Growth and modernization are ineffective if the benefits stay at the top. The plan aimed to ensure that every Indian could meet their basic needs: food, housing, education, and healthcare, while reducing the massive inequality in wealth. These 4 pillars formed the criteria for success. Every policy in the 5-year plans would be measured by whether it moved the needle on these specific goals. In the real world, however, these 4 pillars were often in direct conflict with one another. For example, the goal of modernization often clashed with equity. Introducing a high-tech machine into a factory might increase growth, but it also reduced the need for human labor, making it harder to create the jobs the poor desperately needed. This friction was clearest during the Green Revolution. The use of high-yielding variety seeds drastically increased food production, but the seeds, fertilizers, and pesticides were expensive. There was a real risk that only wealthy farmers would benefit, leaving small-scale farmers even further behind. The government responded with the mixed economy's primary tool, intervention. They provided low-interest loans and subsidized fertilizers so that small farmers could afford the new technology, ensuring that modernization didn't come at the expense of the poor. It was a continuous balancing act. The state had to physically intervene in the market to ensure that the drive for efficiency didn't destroy the commitment to equity. This period of planning was difficult, and the balance was often precarious, but it broke the economic stagnation that had defined the colonial era. By 1990, the share of the service sector had grown to over 40%, a level typically seen in developed nations. This era of rigid planning established the agricultural and industrial foundation that allowed the country to survive long enough to eventually open up to the global economy. By refusing to commit to the rigid extremes of the Cold War, India's planners created a system that allowed a massive democracy to develop on its own terms, building a unique economic identity that remains at the core of the nation today.